Hello, BookTube. This is Weekly Reads. My reading week this week has been quite good. I started the reading week finishing off Spring Snow by Yukio Mishima, translated from the Japanese by Michael Gallagher. This novel is the first in Mishima's magnum opus, The Sea of Fertility tetralogy. It is, on the whole, a series of novels set over the course of the 20th century in Japan, and in the third novel also it spends some time in Thailand. This first novel is set during the final years of the Meiji Emperor and the first year of the Taisho Emperor. And it features a young aristocrat named Kiyoaki Matsugi, who is the son of a newly risen Marcus, which is a noble title. For services, the grandfather had rendered services in the Meiji Restoration. And the father, the current Marcus, pretty much is responsible for the family's fortune. Kiyoaki was raised or fostered by an older, more courtly family called the Ayakuras, which instilled in him a sense of elegance, of beauty, that in Kiyoaki has turned rather extreme, self-destructive, toxic. And he has a weird on-again, off-again relationship with the Ayakura's daughter, Satoko. So over the course of the novel, Kiyoaki and Satoko have an adversarial relationship, and then a courting relationship, and then back to adversarial relationship, and then ultimately the two embark on a destructive, tragic affair that leads to one becoming a nun and the other catching pneumonia and dying at the end. Spoiler alert, sorry about that. So that's the main thrust, is Kiyoaki's relationship with Satoko and this tragic, destructive affair that they're having. Part of this story also deals with the observations of Kiyoaki's only friend, Honda, who is the son of a Supreme Court justice, and Honda is the main recurring character over the course of all four novels, as the idea of the Sea of Fertility tetralogy is that in each novel, Honda has an encounter with a person that he believes is a reincarnation of Kiyoaki, who typically, except for perhaps the final one at the end of the tetralogy, doesn't live all that long. Although perhaps in this case that's the last one that Honda has to deal with. Pity whoever else has to deal with Kiyoaki's reincarnations, because at least with Kiyoaki, he's a bit of a handful. Another subplot is two Thai princes who have come to Japan to study abroad at this elite school that Kiyoaki and Honda attend, and the friendship that forms between the four boys. So I really loved this novel. It was a complete delight to read. I started it last week, and I was loving it, and I spent the first 2 days of this reading week finishing up, and it was just magnificent. I really love this novel, and I'm looking forward to Runaway Horses, the second novel in the tetralogy, which I will be reading sometime in February, which I'll talk a bit about that once I finish up my wrap-up. So I spent much of this reading week reading or rereading The Swimming Pool Library by Alan Hollinghurst. This is his first novel and is set in the very early 1980s. It's about a wealthy young gay man, Will Beckwith, who acts as the narrator of the novel. Will is in his mid-20s. He doesn't have to work except for if he wants to, because in order to avoid death duties during this time, I'm not entirely sure if it's still done or not, but during this time, a lot of aristocratic and non-aristocratic wealthy families would basically settle their estate before death onto their heirs, and if those heirs manage to either live by a number of years or something, that those death duties would not be collected. And so Will's grandfather does that. So Will doesn't have to work. So most of Will's time is spent working out at a club gym and having sex. One day while he's cruising, he saves the life of an elderly gay aristocrat named Lord Nantwich. And the two form a bond as they have several encounters subsequent to this first encounter. And it ends with Nantwich asking Will to read over his diaries and papers with an idea of writing a biography of Lord Nantwich, who has lived a fairly interesting life and has some connections to a number of historically interesting people. Will initially pushes off on or resists the idea of writing this biography, but then he begins to get into it. And so over the course of this relationship, Will also gets a crash course in 20th century gay life before the 1980s, before him. And it's pretty interesting. At the same time, Will has two romances over the course of this book. Initially, he's with a young man named Arthur, who is from a West Indian, I think, background, and he's comes from a fairly homophobic family, and there's an incident that occurs that forces him and Will together for an extended period of time before he disappears and for a long stretch of the novel. And then he also has a relationship with another young man named Phil, who works out at the quarry and who basically Will serves as a sort of guide or teacher in that relationship. All the while, Will also has other encounters with other men. And so ultimately, the novel sort of crescendos as Will's settled life begins to fall apart. Well, not necessarily falls apart, but the safe world that he's constructed for himself begins to falter as he faces betrayal. His attempt to aid Arthur ends up with him getting gay bashed, and his best friend James has a encounter with the law. And so it's really sort of gradually this gay world that Will inhabits begins to fray. And of course, there is the shadow of AIDS, which this novel takes place in before the pandemic begins. So I really loved this reread of this novel. So I've mentioned several times that I have a very on-off relationship with Alan Hollinghurst. Sometimes when I read the Swimming Pool Library, I will love the novel, as I did this reread, and sometimes I'll have a bit more issues. I'll have a harder time with it. And I'm not entirely sure why that is. Is it because, on the one hand, the world that Hollinghurst creates is very attractive, even if it is rooted in privilege. Will is from an aristocratic background. He's very insulated from the travails that Arthur would have, or even to a degree Phil and James. So there's that. And then there's and then I think when I kind of get, and of course Will himself is at times fairly charismatic. And so I think when I'm not necessarily, I don't have a great time with this novel. I think sometimes it's maybe because I sort of lose patience with Will, because he is both charismatic and a jerk at times. So I think it's depending on my mood and how I'm going to respond to Will's character. It's probably to what degree I really love the novel, as I did this reread, and maybe not, as some previous attempts to reread the novel has. I sometimes think I'm probably certifiable. But anyway, but this time I love it, so I'm really looking forward to The Folding Star, which is Hollinghurst's second novel. So yesterday, I started on King Solomon's Mines by H. Rider Haggard. This is for a book tip event that Randy Ray created, in which participants read something by H. Rider Haggard in the month of January. And I decided to have yet another go at King Solomon's Mines. By the way, there is a booktube group reading the Sea of Fertility tetralogy that Greg Van Nether Bibliophile Reads is part of, and I think Ellen of Big Heart Books and Classics is also, and I'm not entirely sure who all else is involved. So back to King Solomon's Mines. So this novel is the foundation of the Lost World genre, in which a group of explorers encounter a civilization or a part of the world that has been not contacted in a very long time. And so in this novel, the main character, or the narrator, is Alan Quatermain. He is a middle-aged hunter and trader living in South Africa. Years before the novel begins, he had a run-in with a English aristocrat who was traveling north to try to find his fortune. He'd heard rumors of a hidden diamond mine. So 2 years later, while returning home to Durban from a trip to Cape Town, Quatermain encounters this man's older brother, Sir Henry, who has come to South Africa to look for his missing younger brother and bring him home. Traveling with Sir Henry is Captain John Good, who is a Royal Navy man who had early retirement and has nothing better to do than, I guess, travel around on adventures with Sir Henry. So Quartermain begins a conversation with the two, and Sir Henry asks, well, what was your encounter with my brother? And so they work it out to where Quartermain will organize an expedition to go look for George Curtis, Sir Henry's younger brother. And so Quartermain, decades ago, encountered a Portuguese man who was descended from an explorer who kind of went north and discovered a strange land. And Quartermain has a map to this place, and so they use that to travel to look for George, and also hope to get some diamonds out of the deal too. So I've read the first few chapters yesterday. I'm up to where they're about to cross over into the land of the Kukuanas. So basically, in this fantasy version of Africa, there's a desert, and then you have to cross this desert, and then there's a mountain range, and the mountains, or two of the main mountains, look like are called Sheba's breasts, and so that's basically they're crossing over that mountain where I stopped yesterday. So on the other side is a land that is inhabited by the Kukuanas, who are a Zulu-based people who've occupied the land for centuries. And I'll talk a bit more about that once I get to that part. But for this part of my reading, I only have the getting there part. So I first read King Solomon's Mines about a long time ago. I think I was 15. 14, no. I would have been 14 when I read it. So when I first read the novel, I rather enjoyed it, as I did she and Alan Quartermain. I had them in a 3-volume omnibus edition, or a 3-novel omnibus edition. And subsequently, coming back to King Solomon's Mines, I haven't had as much success with the novel. I don't know if it's a situation where I find that, on the one hand, I've read better written books. I've also read more better sort of organized thrillers or adventure novels. And I'm kind of feeling that with this novel as well. I'm not having quite the same issues as I usually do, but it is a bit flawed. I think some of the cliffhangers could be better placed in the novel. Certainly, I think there is some bits where you're going, okay, your mission, the whole point of this expedition is to find this missing George. Why exactly are you spending so much time taking a break to go hunting? I mean, I know part of that is Quartermain's and Good's payment for joining in on this expedition, but still it's like, you have a mission here. Also, you kind of notice like there's one of the servants who are hired on for this expedition, Umbapa, very clearly is more than he appears. It's fairly obvious that he's actually from the other side of the mountains. So why exactly did you never actually try to figure out if there was a better way to get there than taking this old fantasy map? that isn't very good. But anyway, so that kind of was picking at me. This reading was like, you really should have asked Papa if there was another way to do this. But then again, it would have only been to the Oasis on another side. But anyway, so this reading, it's okay. I'm not actually exactly loving it though, but yeah, not everything can be perfect. So anyway, so what will I be reading this coming reading week? So I will be continuing with King Solomon's Mines, which I will read a bit more today and then finish off Saturday, tomorrow. And then I think whether I get to it on Saturday or have to begin it on Sunday, I will read Rocannon's World by Ursula K. LeGuin. This is part of a booktube project where a number of booktubers are reading the Hainish stories of Ursula K. Le Guin. I won't be able to do all of it because I don't have the whole of the Hainish cycle. I only have the 5 books or 5 novels in this omnibus, which is Rocannon's World, Planet of Exile, City of Illusions, The Word for World is Force, The Left Hand of Darkness, and I also have as a standalone in mass market paperback The Dispossessed, which I actually have to go find because it's currently in a massive science fiction mass markets that's stuffed into my science fiction and fantasy bookcase. Part of the reason why I do want to do this 2026 library tour. Anywho. And I think I'm going to go ahead and after Rocannon's World, I will read After 1177 by Eric H. Cline for Historathon. And then once they're done, I will move on to my February reading plan, which I have not quite pulled the books for yet. What I will do is I'm going to go ahead and put the Swimming Pool Library, Spring Snow up, and then also go ahead and put up King Solomon's Mines so I can put up the January book haul for fiction, poetry, and drama. And then I think tomorrow I will start pulling the books for the February reading plan, which I will then make the video on Sunday morning, which is the 1st of February, if that makes any sense. So there will be a weekend video from me this week because I like to do my reading plan videos the first day of the month, even though I ordinarily don't like making videos on the weekend. I might also try to do film some library tour videos for science fiction and fantasy, even though I'm not entirely sure how I'm going to do this. Because how it looks right now is, so I have a very small bookcase. And so there's some books on top, some books stacked into the shelves, and then I have 2 boxes and some books on top of those boxes. So I think what I might do is I'll do the books on the boxes first and then put them up somewhere, and then go through the 2 boxes, then do the transwise books that are on the bookcase itself, and then working my way down, do the various layers of the bookcase. And then with the mass markets, I think maybe give myself like a 30-minute time limit to see, or 20-minute time limit to go through that, and then maybe figure something out with that. That bookcase is insane. So anyway, I'm starting to ramble on, so I'm going to go ahead and sign off for now. So I will be back next week with some new videos. So look forward to it, and have a great rest of your afternoon, and have a great weekend. So until I see you next time, BookTube, thank you, and stay safe.